Grinderschool. This is CodeRed rules, and I'm going to be reviewing the hand histories from the previous Grinderschool Cash series. I believe that was week 6, and I've only got about 11 hands here today to go over, so it's probably not going to be all too long. And otherwise, let's go right off the bat. Okie doke. I didn't notice that Pyrotos had posted dead here, so if you guys, first off, like, don't post dead in a cash game. Right? I mean, I don't know how often Pyrotos plays in a cash game, but don't post dead. And secondly, if you do post dead, make sure you raise it up. Like in a situation like this, you'll have the opportunity to isolate the under the gun limper, and what do you call it? It doesn't cost you nearly as much to raise it normally does. Like you could raise it here. It would cost you 15 cents, and if the guy folds it, you would win like 17 cents. So the price that you get on isolation is a lot less because of that fact. All right, and then Jeffrey like limps behind here. I think Jeffrey's limp behind is just fine. No problems with that. In my opinion, all right. The flop bet here is very standard for Jeffrey. I don't think we have any questions at all about the flop play. Under the gun, limp or check calls. And we can go ahead and start forming a range on him. 1, right, he either has a draw, or 2, he's got a pair, right, of either ace X or jack X. Alright, and that's really all we need to know. We don't need to know how often he's got a pair, about, you know what I mean. Right now, we just know that he's got a pair and or a draw of some kind. And in all reality, we are way ahead versus his hand range. So the turn comes, and it brings the third diamond, alright. Some draws got there. Some didn't. The flush draw got there. The straight draws didn't get there. If he still has a pair, right, we are still ahead. And unless he has like ace 9, and then that's really the only hand he could possibly have that we wouldn't lose to. Or sorry, that we would lose to. We were ahead of on the flop, but no longer ahead on the turn. So the question is, right, do we take the free card here, or do we value bet? Are we afraid of him having the flush draw that much that we aren't willing to, put another bet in here? Or are we just okay with just taking it down, like, what, 2 streets of value, or whatever, In my opinion, I would bet here. It's a pretty easy classic spot for a bet fold, even against a relatively unknown opponent. And the reason why I say it's just a pretty easy bet fold is that there are several hands that we don't want to give a free card to. If he does have a diamond right now, right, we don't want to be giving a free river card to a random diamond, a free shot at beating us. And he's still going to be calling us with like any ace as well. So there is still tons of value to get from our opponent, and we don't really want to give any free cards. And we've got to be ahead, right? Unless he just hit the flush on us. Which, it's possible, right? But with the jack of 9 out there, it takes away a lot of his flush combos that he could possibly have. So, in my opinion, I like to value bet here. And I would bet, we don't have to bet too big, right? We want to get value from, like, his weaker diamond. So, I would bet maybe, like, 35 cents. And you know what? Go from there. The river card brings the 4. Our opponent checks. And we bet 40 cents, which is just fine. And we win the hand and showdown. What I would recommend, if we could have bet 35 on that turn. The problem with checking the turn is that we also limit the amount of value we can get on the river. So when we bet, let's say we bet 35 cents here or 40 cents on the turn, he calls. Right, we at least have the option of betting again on this turn for another. Just say $1, okay? So by checking behind the turn with our 2 pair, which is 2 pair in all reality is like the very top of our hand range at most given times, especially on this board. So we could potentially have lost $1 worth of value here. If the river card brings the 4th diamond, we can check behind if you'd like, or if he leads out into us, we could fold if we like as well. I just don't like giving a free card to the diamond draw. We can see, being results oriented here. Once the guy checked the river as well, we definitely need to be going for value. And we see that we were giving him a free card, and he's got actually a lot of outs against us. Any jack or 9 or king or diamond can come and that's a lot of cards. So our two pair is certainly vulnerable. Not really something that I'm willing to give a lot of action to, or give a lot of action, or I forget what's the term, right? Risk him hitting some kind of hand or whatever. So, all right, there's that hand. I'm gonna go. We'll go right on to the next one here. Ace Jack versus Ace Jack.
So this hand's kind of interesting, right? This is let's see, a Pyrotos raises on the button here 4x, which is a very standard raise. There's really not much to talk about there. The biggest thing to talk about right now is just Jeffrey's re-raise. And there are two things really to talk about. One would be the re-raise size, and then one would be the re-raise size, two would be the hand, right? And I guess three also then would be Pyrotos' action against the re-raise. First off, though, you can look at the re-raise size here. He goes, Pyros makes it 4x, JJB makes it to 11, which, being out of position, 14x would be a much better raise size there, so that would be like 70 cents. I would even do 12 or 13, but we don't really want to. Well, I mean, it's kind of up in the air, right? Like 11x is just a little too small, in my opinion. We don't really want to be playing a re-raise pot out of position. The only benefits to the small re-raise size is that we're going to be, enticing Pyrotos to call with a wider range. Although, in all reality, I don't think Pyrotos is basing his calling decisions based off Jeffrey's re-raise size. And if Pyrotos did have like a pair, we don't want to entice him to be calling for side value, because in all reality, we are behind a pocket pair. So, although we want Pyrotos to call with like his Broadway cards, we don't want him to call with his pairs. So there's that. So I would re-raise a little bit larger, and I do recommend raising larger as well. Notice that Pyrotos made it 4x and not 3x. If Pyrotos made it 3x, right, 11x re-raise size becomes a much more beneficial and, I guess, better raise size. Now, granted, if Pyrotos like to raise fold a lot, we wouldn't want to re-raise Ace-Jack suited. At the same time, the re-raise size would be more okay if Pyrotos would fold more often. The hand, though, right? So we can go about the hand. Ace-Jack suited, not really something that you see a lot. I mean, a lot of instructors re-raising for, I guess, in a situation like this, right? I can almost guarantee you that Jeffrey is re-raising here for value, not as a bluff. As if he were re-raising as a bluff, it'd be a really bad spot to bluff. So, in all reality, right, we kind of do want Pyrotos to call in this scenario, bet sizing aside. And so the question is now, like, what should Pyrotos be calling with, like in a blind versus blind scenario like this? One, it would be like based on how Jeffrey plays and how he has been playing. In my history, Jeffrey plays very tight. Ace-Jack offsuit would probably be the very absolute bottom of the calling range for me, only because I know that like Jeffrey's value re-raising range plays much better than Ace-Jack offsuit, right? So I know like Jeffrey might re-raise King Queen pre, but like if anything, that's really the only hand that Pyrotos you can think about calling with Ace-Jack. You're going to be head on, and even then, right, you're not going to be doing too well. Now, if Jeffrey has been pretty active, there's a history here. Calling with Ace-Jack isn't all that bad against a thinking opponent, against someone solid, if you know what you're doing post-flop. And it is a good hand to, when you learn how to play post-flop and re-raise pot. I don't really know if this is the right vehicle, although, I mean, if you guys don't normally play these stakes, you guys usually play higher. Then dropping down to learn how to play, re-raises with a hand like this is actually the best option. So, I guess another reason why I don't like calling with Ace-Jack offsuit is that we really only have one way to win, and at Showdown, really, and that's really to hit our hand. There's really no good bluff opportunities for us given our hand that has a lot of equity. Unlike Jeffrey's hand, right, where he has like suited potential, he can actually at least hit a flush or hit a flush draw, which allows him to bluff and semi-bluff a lot more profitably than, say, Pyrotos can. So that's the reason why I really don't care for the call with the Ace-Jack offsuit pre-flop in this scenario. a lot of times when they happen is 2, right? Like, look, here's just a board, right? It doesn't hit anybody. I would put Pyrotos on some kind of like a pair range, and he's also going to have his air kind of scenarios. Jeffrey has the backdoor flush draw, so he has that going for him. He can also bluff the queen or king much more so than, say, Pyrotos can. Most of the time, right, if Pyrotos has ace-king, he's probably going to be getting it in pre-flop blind versus blind like this. Same thing if he's got queens or better. So it doesn't, like, if a king comes, right, or an ace, it doesn't make too much sense that Pyrotos is going to be willing to get the money in. So therefore, like, Jeffrey can represent the ace and the king a lot better than Pyrotos can, unless Pyrotos was just like floating the flop with complete air. Jeffrey's plan, on the other hand, would be c-bet this flop. If a diamond comes, bet. If a queen or king comes, bet. If an ace comes, depends on what he wants to do. I would probably check if I hit the pair and then bet when I don't. Unless we had, like, if the jack came, I probably would bet the jack. Just because top pair top kicker with a jack is actually pretty strong. Much stronger than, say, like, top pair kicker with ace jack on the ace high board. But, you know, that's really is a matter of discussion. Like, what's, like, Pyrotos going to be doing compared to our hand range. So, I think that's how the hand goes down, right? So Jeffrey bets out half pot or less than half pot, probably half pot after the break is taken out. The bet size here, again on the flop, is open. I mean, we have to assume we're going to be floated a ton. So if we had complete air, I probably would, you know, win done, or I wouldn't even c-bet it at all, because I really don't care for this board in order for us to be continuing as a bluff with, only because our opponent's going to be like floating us in position, or, you know, I mean, bluff. Not really going to be bluff raising us, but like he's not going to be folding any pair to us in this scenario. And it doesn't, like, a half pot bet here doesn't make it seem like we're wanting to get stacks in, although at the same time it looks like we're just trying to maybe entice a call, maybe push them away later. If we're going to be like two barreling, you know, as a bluff and not be committed in this scenario, we're going to have to keep our bets on the smaller side. So the half pot bet here is not a bad bet size in any case. And we pretty much have like one more bluff to make, and that would be right here once this diamond hits. So this is a good card for us to two barrel. I'd be very interested on what Jeffrey would do if the diamond didn't come off. I mean, if I'm him, I'm tempted to more like just check fold. Probably would have check fold to the flop if we didn't have the diamond draw to go with it. But how much did he bet here? $2. See, I don't like this bet size. I think this bet size is like way too much, because in all reality, we don't need to bet this much for value, and it's kind of a fishy bet size if you think about it, right? If Pyrotos calls, right, he's got 220 behind, and the pot would be $6, so we can't realistically three barrel here in any given scenario. So Pyrotos could just call here or raise it. And the thing is, too, when we have our ace jack of diamonds in this scenario, we need to make a decision on whether or not we would, bet call it off on the turn, or if we would just bet fold it. I believe that we actually would want to bet fold it rather than bet call it, given Pyrotos's, strong line taking it where he calls flop, raises turn. Now, there might be a chance where if we do bet it out, we're not going to be able to get it. We're not going to be able to fold. So if we bet 2 here, right, and right now if Pyrotos gets it all in, pot would be $8.40 with $2 to call, getting 4 to 1 under money. It would be a very standard call there with the ace high flush draw. But let's take in mind, let's say we bet $1.25, right, and $1.25 in this scenario, if we get called, pot would then be $4.75. And our opponent was going to have $3 behind. So if he were to jam it in, it would be a $3 call into a pot of about $8, right? So we're getting less than 3 to 1 under money. We probably would want to fold in that scenario, getting 3 to 1 under money, even though like 25% equity. The ace high and the flush draw is only going to be like at most like break even scenario against like a purely value range of Pyrotos. It's really going to be up in the air. Like, it would probably be a break-even, very zero variant, or high variant, zero EV kind of a call. So I probably would look at folding in that scenario. Although, it is up in the air, because I'm counting the pot, the money in the pot without the rake taken out. So it would probably be a little bit less size than that. So this is almost like a full pot size bet by Jeffrey. and I don't really care for the bet size. I would see and like him because this is not very balanced at all with what we would do with our value hands. Which when you have like the ace high flush draw like this, you are trying to balance it out with the rest of your value hands, and perhaps he's thinking right like, oh well, I want to make sure that Sammy knows that I'm not folding. Well, okay, well that means if he does go all in though, he's able to value ton you very easily with like any kind of overpair and stuff. So keep that in mind. And Pyros does in fact fold. The way Pyros took his line, right? I think the problem was just him calling pre-flop, and when you call it pre-flop, you almost make it seem like you've got to do something on the flop, and in all reality, you don't have to play around every single flop. 9-4-4, two double paired, a paired board like that. There's not a whole lot we can do without any equity, right? So it's just not very feasible for us to try and float or represent any kind of a hand. We can't really bluff raise. We don't have any equity to really call with, so I would have just folded the flop to the c-bet. You could perhaps bluff raise the flop. It looks very fishy, but I probably would bluff raise it rather than call it. In order of just because doesn't mean it's just because it's not a very good board to bluff raise doesn't mean we can't bluff raise it. Although I wouldn't like to, but it's up in the air. All right, so let's go here on to the next hand. Alright, so this hand, we don't really get to see Keshimen's hands until showdown because he didn't send me the hand histories. But here we go. Keshi raises it up, and Pyrotos calls out of position here with 10-9 offsuit. This is a very bad call. Maybe he's just doing it just to play a hand against Keshi. I don't know, it's because he's having some fun. But in general, guys, this is not a very good call at all for 6-max or any kind of a full ring game. 10-9 offsuit, best is to just fold it pre-flop, unsuited connectors, pretty garbage hands. And then next, okay, Pyrotos decides to lead out here to 4x. In general, not a good play, but I know Pyrotos likes to lead a lot of value hands as well, and he does have a gut shot, a couple overcards that he can continue to lead on, which isn't necessarily all that bad of a scenario. If he also turns a jack, he's got open end straight draw to go with it. A queen, he's got double gutter, and a king, is a scare card as well as an ace. So there's a lot of cards that can come that Pyrotos can bet as a bluff. So he leads out, and I don't mind the lead. Keshimen calls, and so Keshimen's call either symbols like some kind of a draw or a pair of some kind, or perhaps even just like an ace high. I would feel like though if Keshi had like didn't have a pair, he would have raised the flop. So like I would assume that Keshimen's hand would include like weak pairs or even strong pairs or any kind of a pair, and also a strong draw, one that like he'll either bluff later in the hand or he doesn't mind playing a cheap pot till he hits it. Okay, so we see the turn, and this doesn't look like it's a very good card for many people, right? If I'm Pyrotos, I am probably leading it again. I would like to keep the pressure on Keshimen, and if we did have a draw, right, and we were leading the draw, like since it just came in, we can still represent it. Plus, we still have the two overcards and the gut shot draw, and if the four flush comes again, we can continue to bluff that too. So I think we got to keep the bluff going rather than give it up. As we can see in this scenario, we check the turn. The river is a queen, and we check the turn again for Pyrotos. Think about the terms of lines. Okay, the lines that you could take in a given hand from start to finish, right? And if you guys haven't seen my How to Master Heads Up series, it's not a microstake series, but in the very first part, I talk about betting lines and what hands we can represent with certain betting lines. Okay, when we bet check bet, we're either pot controlling the turn, we have thin value, or we have complete bluff. In this scenario, right, Pyrotos bet flop check turn. He could bet again on the river and make it seem like it's going to be going for thin value, which is a pretty feasible line to take. If I'm Pyrotos, right, and we have a hand like Ace 8 or 8x, betting the flop, checking turn, betting the river, not necessarily all that bad of a line in this scenario because Keshimen is unlikely to have a queen, and given our line, we could very easily have a bluff. So Keshimen would have a really hard time calling us down here without like at least second pair or better. Perhaps like like pocket sevens or better in the scenario. Um, Given that Keshimen checked behind the turn, right, he doesn't have the flush, because if he has the flush, it's a very horrible check behind the turn because, he wants to build a pot and get it up, build a pot up for value. He doesn't really have 2 pair on the turn, so there's not really a whole lot Keshimen strongly can have. So I'm willing to think that we can take it away, or at least we're going to have enough fold equity here to push Keshimen off of whatever hand that he has. And if Keshimen calls us down here with like 3rd or 4th pair, then, you know what I mean, we should at least take any notes in that scenario, and also don't bluff. Don't bluff in the future because he's going to be paying you off. So turn it around and bet value, bet 10 for value. And as we can see here, we kind of let Keshimen off the hook by, he raised up ace 3 suited from the cutoff, which is just fine. An aggressive blind stealing game. He called the flop, which is just fine. Keshimen played this hand perfectly. It's Pyretos that made the mistake here, first by calling pre, and then leading the flop and then not continuing on the bluff on later streets, and just betting one and done, letting Keshimen check down his marginal hand. Nobody really ever folds anymore to 1 bet post flop, and it's a rare occurrence when they do. So keep that in mind. And if you are bluffing, make sure you have a plan to continue bluffing on the next street. Let's go on here. Okay, 1 and 2 cases here. Pyretos raises it up. Jeffrey calls. The Pyretos raise it up in the small blind here, 10-3 offsuit. I probably would fold it most of the time, unless we have a read on our opponent that he likes to fold 70% of the time in the big blind. As you can see in this case, Jeffrey is not folding 70% of them in the big blind with the 8-7 offsuit, of which I also don't like to call. First off, right, where it's 4x to, we have to play 3x. We're getting not even 2 to 1 in our money. Like, I would fold it here, go on to the next hand. At the same time, right, because first off, 7-8 offsuit is rarely, if ever, ahead of any hand. Secondly, it just doesn't play all that well in position. We don't have a lot of equity. There's no suitedness to it. I mean, you wrote an article yourself on on the value of suited connectors. This is an offsuit connector. Not really that great. If you wanted to re-raise it as a bluff, I could get behind you on that. I can get behind you on re-raise as a bluff because Pyretos can't really call anything out of position. And if you're tired of him raising your blind, just re-raise him as a bluff. Pop him up to 5 or 6 or 50 or 60 cents here, and make him pay. Pyretos can't really call too many hands out of position either, so keep that in mind. Back to Pyretos. Not a big fan of the 10-3 offsuit raise. If he were suited, perhaps we can talk. But usually any kind of hand there with a deuce or a 3 in it, I'm not really liking it all too much. Other than the ace and king x kind of hands, queen x. But 10-3 offsuit's a little too low for my liking. Alright, so now it's time for post flop. Everybody hit a piece of this board, which is good, right? Pyretos hit top pair, he leads out. Jeffrey's got bottom 2, and he just calls. Results being oriented aside, when we have bottom 2 pair, right? 8-7 offsuit, bottom 2 pair, we want to be raising this flop. If we get jammed on, then we'll have a decision to make. But right now, we need to bet, we need to raise for value, and we can also represent a lot of bluffs. This board right here is very good for us to raise for thin value because he can have a lot of draws he's going to call us with, and a lot of he's not going to give us a lot of credit either, given that it's 2 suited, it's connected. There's so much going to go on, and he's certainly going to call us with a lot of hands that we're head up there. Keep in mind that he can have 9s, jacks, queens, kings, aces, ace 10, 10x, 10-9, 8-9, 9-7. All these hands that have a lot of equity against us, and there's a lot of cards that can come on the next street that will either 1, we'll lose value on because he'll check fold, or 2, that we'll lose to, right? We don't want to see, right? We don't want to see a 6, 9, jack, heart, 10, and perhaps any number of Broadway cards higher than 10. We're going to jack, right? Including maybe even queen, king, or ace, that we're just going to be losing value on. So, yeah, why? There's really no reason to still play here. So we call, right? I don't like to call. I would have raised. This is one of these cards that we don't want to see. Pyretos checks. We check behind. We could very easily value bet thinly in this scenario, even if it's just 50 cents. We don't want to be giving free cards right now, and we can bet for value. I think Pyretos probably won't be folding for 1 bet right now, even though he has a 10. River comes a king. we checked and we get some value out of it finally, and the river bet is fine. And in the end, the turn river bet, the amount of value that you guys got in this scenario is the same. I don't think we could have gone for 2 suits of thin value, although it's close. We give ourselves the opportunity to if we bow it up. But the biggest problem, in my opinion, is not raising the flop to about like 75 cents, because calling in position, we raising the flop, we could bluff raise this flop a lot, like Queen Jack, King Jack, all kinds of hands. Backdoor diamond draws, along those lines, right? Even if we had, maybe if we didn't have 7-6, we wouldn't want to do it. But yeah, you could definitely raise this flop up. So we can go on here onto the next hand. So here we have a hand played by Nodeg. We actually got a couple people here in the pot. So Nodeg raises it up. Ace-8 suited, early position. I don't like the raise. I would fold. Secondly, first off, if there's a donk in the blinds, all right, perhaps we can raise it up, get a pot with the donk. Both of these guys, unless you consider Sammy the donk, there's really not a whole lot going on here. I would just fold it up. Second mistake to make. If I'm JGB, I would seriously consider calling here, given how cheap it is, right? 40 cents to call. And if we call here, we're going to entice Nodeg to call. And our hand plays fairly standard post-flop. We're kind of doing it for set value. We can maybe call one bet with an overpair or something like that. But most of the time, right, if people see us call a raise and a re-raise pre-flop cold like that, they're going to be stopping in their tracks and seeing what the hell we have a made hand, a good hand. So I think it doesn't play all too horribly post-flop. Plus, like, the SPR is such that, like, it's going to be very difficult for us to get our stack in the middle. Alright, so JGB folds, which, it's understandable fold, but Nodeg calls, which is a very, very bad call. So not only is this a bad raise, but this is also a bad call. Right? We're out of position. We have a very easily dominated hand. There's not really a whole lot we can do post-flop. We flop middle pair, right? We can't really fold any pair once we hit it in a re-raise pot. So there's one pot, and then we luckily turn 2 pair. I don't like the check min raise either in this scenario. We might as well just go ahead and check raise all in. I don't really know why you min raised, and even then, depending on what our opponent's hand range is, right, for re-raising pre-flop. If our opponent's a complete maniac lagtard, then let's just go ahead and get the money in right now. If our opponent's a complete nit, whose re-raising range pre-flop is like ace, queen, ace, king, kings, aces, right, or queens, obviously doesn't. Okay, take that down. He's not going to have queens. Betting 2 streets is this scenario. If he does, he's not going to be calling the check raise. So maybe we don't even want to be check raising with ace-8 here. That's kind of the problem with calling the re-raise out of position, is that we can't get full value when we hit even a hand like 2 pair, just because we're dominated so often, like a hand like this, yeah. And we check min raise out and he folds. I don't care for the check min raise. I don't really actually like your action on anything but the flop check call. All right, so Jeffrey here calls on the button. That's just fine. Powerhouse folds. That's just fine too. And so here we go. We got heads up. Jeffrey calls on the button. This is a pretty standard situation, in my opinion. We got here number bets. We call. Number bets again, and lo and behold, Jeffrey raises it up, and I don't understand this raise at all. First off, he's got to be doing it as a bluff. We have no really need to bluff though in the scenario when our opponent. You can't expect our opponent to be folding an ace, right? So if he's raising under the gun, our opponent's raising under the gun value range is going to have a lot of 2 pairs in it: ace queen, ace king, king queen, all of which aren't going to be folding right now. Also, if he has a hand like ace jack, ace 10, he's not going to be folding that because he's got a pair and a gut shot. 2, we have a pair and a gut shot. We've got a lot of equity. The ace is a good card for our opponent to bluff barrel, making our, meaning that we're probably still pretty far ahead. We can call here, and we can decide whether or not we want to call again on the river, but don't raise here as a bluff, guys. And this certainly isn't a value raise, because if it was a raise for value, then we would have raised the flop for value. And, number jams in his face, and we let it go. Also, if it was a value raise, we would be getting it in when we raise. right? Because when we raise for value, and he jams in on us, and the reason why we raise for value is so we can get our stacks in. So, yeah, not a big fan of this play. All right, on to the next hand. All right, so this hand was played between Disco Dan and Salsa Edge. All right, we won't really see what Disco Dan has at the very end, but I can. You guys want to guess out what kind of hand we think he has? Salsa Edge checks behind here, so he's got some kind of like either showdownable hand or a complete error. Disco Dan checks again, and he calls Salsa's bet now. So, like, if I'm putting Salsa on a made hand, I'm putting him on like Queen X, kind of, because if he has a king, he bets the flop with the king, or he's got complete error still. And so Disco Dan check calls. So Disco Dan probably has some kind of weak hand as well, given that he's checked called the turn here. He has some kind of showdownable hand, either king, like weak king or weak Queen X. And then the river, he check calls again. Salsa Edge doesn't really when Salsa Edge checks behind the flop here, it's very obvious he doesn't have a made hand of any kind. And so Disco Dan can really call us with a pretty wide range. He's like, Salsa Edge like representing like a 4, right? This is and then we wake up here and we see Disco Dan has ace king. Now what I wanted to say is, let's go back to the pre-flop play. All right. Disco Dan, in all accords, should have re-raised ace-king pre-flop. I mean, it should be a standard value raise in this scenario, not a standard call. Like full ring game, we might want to call it more often than 6 max. All right, so let's re-raise ace-king pre-flop, and once the flop checks through, ace-king has to be good enough. I would start betting here. I would not rely on our opponent to bet once he already checked behind the flop. We also should be bluffing a lot in this turn once our opponent checks behind when we do call. So let's balance that out with our value bets. As played though, I guess we got maximum value from error that we possibly could. I just wanted to mention to you guys, re-raise pre-flop, and also Jeffrey, top off your stack because you look like a fool there with 75 big blinds. All right. Let's go on. Alright, so this is a very fun and interesting hand. Keshiman calls, Jeffrey raises, Jeffrey calls, and Pyrotos decides to re-raise it up with pocket 4s. First off, pocket 4s is a horrible hand to re-raise in this scenario. Just absolute bad hand to do it with. Alright, he should be calling here instead. He's getting set odds to call. Why not call? Let's go ahead and see flop multi-way. Helps him out. Okay, re-raising here as a bluff. First off, it's a bad re-raise size, right? If we're going to be re-raising here, making it 75 cents would be the most optimal play, in my opinion. It's basically like 4x times the raise size plus JGB's call, right? And so Keshiman calls, and then Jeffrey calls. The call here, which I don't like the most, is Jeffrey's. The overcall out of position here. Not a big fan. We're out of position. We're actually in the worst position possible. We have no position on anybody. Let's just fold it pre-flop. Right? Against a raise and a re-raise and a call, King Queen suited is going to be dominated very heavily. If we have a pair, we can call the pair, but we can't really call King Queen suited. All right. So we have. If we're Pyrotos, right, we have the underpair of 4s. And if we're Jeffrey, we have overcards and a backdoor flush draw. If we were in position, okay, Jeffrey, we would be able to call a bet. All right, we check. Pyrotos bluffs with the best hand. We won't get to see Keshi's hand until later. Pyrotos bluffs with the best hand. Keshi calls. Jeffrey calls. Jeffrey's getting about 3.6 to 1 on his money. And with 4 outs, right, he needs, about 8 to 1, 9 to 1 to call. He's not getting it. You know what I mean? So, again, this is another check fold here, calling a gut shot, re-raise pot, and a C-bet out of position. Not a very good play, even though we have, the flush draw. Because look what happens here when we call. The pot size is too ginormous.
I mean, if we turn a heart here, maybe he could jam it in. If Jeffrey wanted to continue playing, maybe check raising it all in would be a better option here than calling. And if it's too spewy for you guys, then I totally understand, and then just check fold. Okay. Now comes the problem when we re-raise a hand like pocket fours. We don't really know what the frick we should be doing with it, right? Like, we bet here, we have the best hand, and go from there. Alright? But, no, we don't. We don't know what to do. This board is horrible for fours, as like every what do you call it? Every board is horrible for fours unless it has a 4 in it. So there we go. Keshiman bets. Both of you guys fold after putting a lot of money in the pot. Keshiman shows the king queen off, and we appreciate him showing, because it shows you like exactly how Pyrotos can fold the best hand here when all he had to do was just call pre-flop with this for set value, and otherwise he like lost his big. He lost like $8 here with the best hand. You know what I mean? This isn't just the $5 pot. This isn't the money he's putting the money. He lost $8 worth of pot. Like that's 160 big blinds. You know what I mean? It's an extra stack that Keshiman got just by bluffing in this scenario. I mean, not a very well played all the way around, but let's go ahead and go on. So here we got another hand with Keshi in it. He's pretty aggro. Pyrotos calls in position with ace-3 offsuit. This is a very, very, again, bad call. Ace-3 offsuit plays horribly in a raised pot, plays horribly just all around when we're calling it. We can maybe blind steal with it, but that's about it. We don't want to be intentionally playing this hand, guys, so pretty bad call. And Keshiman checks to us. This is almost a good scenario for Pyrotos to just go ahead and bet and try to take it down now, rather than checking it down and losing it. But I guess my biggest thing here is just Pyrotos calling the ace-3 offsuit here in position. Also, Keshiman raising ace-9 offsuit in this position here. I'm not a big fan of it either. Both of these guys' pre-flop plays are pretty bad. Alright, let's go on. We might be able to see a couple of these guys' hands here at the end. Let's go on, see how play is going on here. Okay, so Disco Dan has Queen Jack, and Derek KWA has Ace Jack. Those are the two Grinderschool members that I'm going to be looking at right now. All right, so Ace Jack offsuit under the gun raise, perfectly standard. Queen Jack here out of position, I would fold. If we're in position, I would call it. Out of position, we can't really be playing all too many hands. And if you guys feel like you guys are losing a lot of money from the blinds, it's probably from calling too much in cases like this. All right, we can call if we're playing against a blind stealer when our hand range does better against the equity. But when we're playing against somebody who raises under the gun, whose hand range is much tighter, who has higher reverse implied odds, you know what I mean, then we're going to be losing a lot of money. As you can see here, where we go ahead and check call the flop with Queen Jack, and we're dominated by his Ace Jack. We've only got 3 outs, right? And then when we hit when we do hit our 2 pair, all right, we don't even get maximum value from it, right? This should be certainly a check raise all in, and it's not even that close. The way this hand has gone down, where we call and we lose about $3 worth of value here potentially in the hand, and we actually don't even get any money in the hand. I guess we win like 68 cents, right? But that's about it. We could have just, you know, I mean, if maybe Derek W. Day's hand range is going to be like ace queen and kings and aces, and you know what I mean? Like, he's going to be like stacking off with us a lot. He could even have like a flush draw of some kind. I mean, let's get the money in there on that turn with top 2 pair. Top two pair in a 6-max game is pretty much the nuts at any given time. So, yeah, I don't really care for the way Disco Dan played his hand in that scenario. Derek KWA, very, very thin turn value bet. Very thin. I like it, though. I do. I think you can't really put your opponent on a queen, so I think he played the hand very well. And, yeah, let's just, we got one last hand here to go. Again, between the dynamic duo of Keshi and Pyrotos. Pyrotos, again, man, just call out of position here. Very, very, very bad. Hopefully you know that. Hopefully you've gotten that point as of right now. We flop a 10. We're not folding the 10. I don't like the check call flop lead turn line with the hand that you have. In fact, the hand that you have is almost exclusively what you're representing. As you increase in stakes and skill level, as we increase in stakes and skill level, we were just going to be check calling down and trying to get your opponent to barrel into us. Check off lead turn line is actually good to prevent him from checking behind when we feel like he has a draw. But most of the time, what's going to happen is we're going to get like bluff raise, and we're going to put ourselves in a tough scenario. If we're not planning on folding to a raise, then I actually don't mind leading on the turn. And then we check call the river. So this entire line has been really weird. The way it went down. We can see what hand Keshi had here. He had the Queen 9. I understand Pyrotos' line much more than I understand Keshiman's line. He's not really getting a price to call on the turn with a gut shot. I'm sorry. If he wanted to make a play with a gutter ball, I would like to see you raise it up rather than call. Calling it here, you're getting like 2.4 to 1 in your money, and you've got another like 10 to 1 behind with a gutter ball. You need, what do you get? Like, you get count like maybe 4 outs, right? If you have the flush out there, so you can't really give that. And so if you hit a jack, you got to hope to get your stack in the middle when you do hit it. You just don't have the implied odds to draw to the flush. Perhaps you're trying to bluff the river. But honestly, though, like given that Pyros has already put in 2 streets of value, the chances of you being able to bluff him off whatever hand that when the draw misses or whenever you miss your hand is going to be pretty unlikely. So it's like a scenario where you're not going to be able to get your stack in the middle because the pot isn't very large. 2, like you're not going to be able to bluff him off a hand because he already put money in. And yeah, so I would just go ahead and fold here. If you wanted to continue, raising the turn would be a much better option here with the Queen 9. Than calling it down. We get lucky on the turn or on the river and hit one of our bare queens and get some value out of it there. Still not enough value for us to be able to call properly on the turn. I'm sorry. So that has been 11 hands here. A lot of the problems were pre-flop, and pre-flop having problems with your pre-flop hand range is going to directly correlate and having problems with post-flop. And then, therefore, also having problems just overall. When you have both problems pre-flop and post-flop, you're not going to be doing all too well. Otherwise, I figured this video went a little longer than I expected it would, so I'm actually happy about that. Otherwise, guys, I will talk to you guys next time. This has been CodeRed Rules, and good luck at the tables.